A new study in London has found that gangs are more ruthless, organised and profit-driven than ever before. A new report has been commissioned by Waltham Forest Council, and it's found that gangs are moving away from the traditional postcode wars kind of system and their traditional rivalries, and they're now focused on dealing Class A drugs and being profit driven and operating away from technology and away from the police. I guess it's a good thing they've put aside their petty rivalries. Now their beef with each other will be who's selling drugs on which bit of land, as opposed to who's from which postcode. Crazy. But it says in the report here, it's no longer about postcodes, and they spoke to different participants of this study, of people connected to gangs or historically connected to gangs. One person said, "We just don't hear about postcodes. They've evolved now in that, the money's with the drugs," said participant 9. Another one, it's moved on from postcode related activity. It's now more to do with drug dealing. I think that's changed probably over the last maybe 5 years, said participant 8. And the paper also says, when the classic reluctant gang study was completed 10 years ago, the focus was upon postcode territories that needed to be defended from outsiders. Gang members described an emotional relationship with their local area. So they're moving away from traditional rivalries, and now they're becoming more professional and profit-driven. They've got more of a focus on a business model that's focused on the drugs market. Participant 48 told the study, "You notice how gangs have changed, how their modus operandi has changed. It just shows that they will evolve. The strong gangs will evolve and change." And the report goes on to say a consistent theme across the accounts of ex-gang members, young people and professionals, was that there had been a move toward a more professional operating model that was focused upon the drugs market. That seems to have exploded in the last few years, said participant 6. I think the drug dealing. I think it's still more now because of the whole thing, the explosion around drugs. It's more around getting the money. So gang members see an explosion around drugs, and they're using that. They're moving away from traditional rivalries, making more money, and becoming more ruthless. And we're certainly seeing gangs becoming much more ruthless. Moped attacks, for instance, I reported yesterday, have gone from a few hundred in 2012 to 23,000 last year. This is moped thieves, moped attacks that I'm talking about. So they're definitely becoming more ruthless and organised. They're stealing more, they're more about profit, and more people are being killed. More people are being stabbed and killed in the street. There's an interesting section here about gang structure. It says the term gang has provoked considerable controversy with the academic community. Pitts, 2007, identified a debate between two broad approaches that continue to this day. The first approach is the youth governance approach, which disputes the existence of gangs and argues that the term is used as a justification of the scapegoating and criminalisation of predominantly black youth. Let's not forget that it's black youths who are also the biggest victims of this crime. One former statutory sector professional said, "I personally do not believe there are gangs in Waltham Forest. Does that mean I don't believe there are groups of young people who are involved in criminal activity who are involved in violence? Of course there are." So there's no gangs, but there are collections of young people committing crime. But there's no gangs, right? Okay. The participant went on to state that there's only a small percentage of young people who are involved in crime. Okay, nobody's suggesting that all young people are involved in crime. Consequently, there's a danger that talking of gangs can be used to criminalise young black males who are visible on the streets. What? Nobody talks about gangs to criminalise or demonise young black males. Like I just said, let's not forget the biggest victims of this stuff is young black males. They're the biggest victims. When you hear this stuff about how you can't talk about it in terms of gangs and you can't say that they're thugs and all this stuff, it's immediately on the defensive. They're assuming that this is being made about race, and it's not. It's not. The person in this study, participant 31, the same person who said that, said, "Working class young people, black young people have always inhabited social space. They're not middle class, they haven't got nice big houses, right, with glass and marble floors." Glass floors, interesting. They're not private Eton Harrow school, right, so their social ward is on the streets, or if you want to play football, play cricket, you go out with your mates. Unfortunately, we want to ethnically cleanse our streets. We want to be gentrified. We want nice middle-class people to live in these swanky flats. We don't want to see roughneck kids hanging about laughing and joking. It's nothing about roughneck kids. It's not about having no working class people on the streets. Gentrification is just a process that happens in big cities these days. Completely different issue that we'll talk about another time. But this isn't about not wanting working class kids there. People are rightfully concerned when they see gangs of youths roaming the streets because they're committing crime. You know, can we at least have a bit of honesty here? What this report is showing us is that gang crime is going up. It's a problem and it's changing, and maybe the postcode rivalry is gone and now they're focused on drugs, but is that any better? I don't think so. Gangs in Waltham Forest, let's look at this. Approximately 250 recognised gangs in the whole of London, which is around 4,500 people. And in Waltham Forest in 2017, around 230 individuals identified as gang members. 56 are currently imprisoned. 230 identified as gang members, so I wonder how many more don't identify because they don't want to out the fact that they're in a gang. I'm surprised that 230 people actually admitted it. But it shows us there's a problem here. And when we say, no, there's no gangs in Waltham Forest, like this former statutory sector professional said, when you say, oh, there's no gangs, but there are groups of young people committing crimes, I can't help but want to laugh. It's insane. It's insane, but it's also dangerous and it's worrying. There's only so much we can actually learn from current gang members because everything they tell us we've got to take with a pinch of salt. But there's also only so much we can learn from these former statutory sector professionals who tell us that gangs don't exist in Waltham Forest. What? They tell us gangs don't exist, but groups of young people who commit crimes do? To tell us that that gangs don't exist in Waltham Forest is ludicrous. Look at the Marley Boys. The Marley Boys is one group that was looked at in this report. It's said to be the most business-driven, violent and ruthless new kind of gang that's operating in London. It shuns social media and technology to stay away from the police. When we see reports that say there's a new kind of gang, they're shunning social media, operating in a way they would have done maybe 30 years ago, they're more ruthless, more organised, they're selling more drugs across London because that's what London wants these days. What do you think happens when you create a metropolis of hipsters and far-left activists? Of course they all want drugs, and it's being brought in by their gangs. It's madness. When you hear that the Marley Boys are doing this kind of activity, are committing this kind of crime, and then we hear the reports of the people being stabbed all over London, the moped crime all over London, you have to wonder, what does the future hold? So yes, crime exists, yes, gangs exist in Waltham Forest, and we should certainly stop listening to people that tell us when we talk of gangs we're just trying to scapegoat certain communities. That's ludicrous. The report tells us gangs exist, and this one tells us that they're focusing less on postcodes and more on crime and drug-related crime and peddling drugs and pushing drugs into inner city London. That should worry us, especially when you consider the fact that knife crime and gun crime is rising in the city as well. This is a worrying trend, and we should take it seriously. If you want to see more from me and the rest of the Rebel team, remember to like and subscribe.